Hello, listeners. Hello, viewers. Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome to my channel, Literature Made Simple. We are still continuing with our journey, trying to unravel more mysteries and make literature simpler than it seems or than it's talked about. In our last lesson, we looked at some sound devices, and I mentioned to you that poetry or literature in general is so interesting because we are able, as people of literature or as poets, playwrights, or dramatists, more limited or predominantly used by poets, they are able to write and make their writings unique by relying on some devices. Now, the sound devices that we learned in our last lesson are alliteration, assonance. We also look at euphony and cacophony. If you haven't listened or watched that lesson yet, then it's very important you do that because it's going to help you in understanding today's lesson. In today's lesson, we are continuing with what we did last. That is the part one of sound devices. Today is the part two. And today we are going to look at two important or two equally important sound devices, rhymes and onomatopoeia. Now, when we talk about rhyme, what do we mean? Basically, rhyming as a sound device simply means that the repetition of same sounds. So you realize that we are trying to look at something like alliteration or assonance or euphony or cacophony. But the unique thing about rhyming is that the sounds that are repeated are usually found at the ends of the words, not repetition of the same letters, repetition of the same sounds. Now, it could be three, four letters sounding the same way. It could be a monotone or it could be a monotone or a diphthong or a triphthong. No problem with that. But the sounds that are repeated should be the same and it should be found at the end of the word. We have different types of rhyming. We have internal rhymes, we have alternate rhymes, we have end rhymes, even though predominantly or commonly used ones or one is the end rhyme, which is the repetition of the same sound that is usually found at the end of words, at the end of lines in a poem. Now, when you look at the examples on the screen, the first two sentences, if I could call them that way, we have burning bright as one, then we have in the forest of the night. So here you realize that the word bright has the end sound being it, bright. Then the word night also has the end sound being it. I highlighted the words here but not the sounds because with end rhyming or with rhyming, we usually pay attention to end sounds, but we write it with the words. So b and are not inclusive in the sounds that makes or qualifies it to be a rhyme. So we have it. Then in the second example, which has to do with the four sentences, there we have a word is dead when it is said. Some say that day. So ed, dead, ed, and said, ed. They are the same. They have the same sounds repeated. Then we have say, a, and they, a. They are also the same. They have the same sounds repeated. So even though dead and said starts with d and s, they are not inclusive in the sounds or the same sounds that qualifies those two words to be rhyme or qualifies them to be classified as being rhyming. The same applies to the s in say and the in they. Now, two things that I want to mention under rhyming are, especially the end rhymes as I have on the screen, are one, bright and night are found at the ends of the words. It's because of my screen, that's why it appears like this. So you can see the punctuation mark there, and the next letter is capitalized. So bright, night, end. So call them end rhymes. A perfect example of end rhymes is a word is dead when it is said. Some say that day. Even though a word is dead when it is said, it's an enjambment, meaning you have to read from one line to the other to get the message. The word that ends the two couplets sounds the same, or they have the same sounds at the end. Now, another thing is when you are writing a rhyme scheme, we start with the letters of the alphabet A, B, C, up to Z. That is if the poem is so long. Now, if the first sound automatically, not if, sorry, automatically, the first sound in the first line or on the first line of the poem is A. There is no flexibility here that you should start with any letter of your choice. No, it starts with A. The A could be a lowercase a or an uppercase A. In other words, it could be a capital A or a small a. Now, in the next or on the next line, that's the second line, if the last word sounds the same as that of the first word, you repeat the letter A again. But when it sounds differently, then you move to the next letter, which is B. So if you look at a word is said, automatically that is A. When a word is dead, automatically is A. When it is said, B. A again. A because ed, similar sounds or same sounds. Therefore, they are rhyming. And once they are rhyming, they become the same letter. So A. Now, if this poem has 20 lines, wherever on any line you encounter another word ending the line by having the same ed, dead, said, ed sound, you repeat the A. So the A now applies to any other sound that has this faithful or particular sound, any other word, that has this sound. Now, when you move to the next line, some say A does not sound the same as dead and said. Therefore, it moves to the next available letter, which is B. That day also B. So the rhyme scheme for this quatrain is A, B. It could be A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B. Once you number them based on the similarities of the sounds, and all sounds that sounds the same, I like that. All sounds that sounds the same should carry the same letter. Thank you. Now we move on to the next sound device, onomatopoeia. This device, starting from the name, actually comes with its own issues. There are a few people that usually have issues pronouncing this sound or this letter or this word. Some say onomatopoeia, but I think basically it should be onomatopoeia. So onomatopoeia is a sound or a word that creates a sound that is similar or the same as the meaning. So there are some words in English that when they are pronounced, the sound you get from the pronunciation depicts or gives you an idea about what they mean in the real world. For example, before I come to the examples on the screen, for example, the dog barked, whoa. So whoa, W-O-O, which is depicting the sound of the dog, actually helps you to get an idea about a barking dog in the real world. He banged the door. So when somebody opens the door and closes it hard, bang, it creates a sound. And that is quite similar to the sound that you hear when you pronounce the word banged. Now we have some examples on the screen. One, the buzzing bee flew away. The buzzing bee. Now, basic onomatopoeia would have read the buzzing bee flew away. Zzz. So you get the zzz as in the way a bee flies in the word buzzing, which is a word that describes the sound made by the bee. That is basic onomatopoeia. But when you go above a little, you do not always get the sound like I stated in the dog barked, whoa. You just hear the dog bark. So bark, which is a word that creates a sound, will give you an idea about how a dog barks. So the buzzing bee flew away. Instead of giving it in the basic form, the buzzing bee flew away. Zzz, you just say the buzzing bee flew away. The sack fell into the river with a splash. Now, this is not necessarily limited to sacks, but when you drop a lot of things in a river, it creates a splash sound. Or when you pour water on the ground and it creates a sound. So that sound can be predicted from the word splash. The books fell on the table with a loud thump. So if you drop a book, specifically a book that is quite heavy, if you drop a book that is quite heavy on a table or on the ground, it creates a thump, a kind of sound like that, which is a thump. So same there, then the rustling leaves kept me awake. So when you walk, if you decide to take a walk in a forest full of dry leaves, you hear a lot of rustling sound, and that chai chai chai, depending on the kind of dry leaves you are walking on, by the way, is seen in the rustling, and it also helps. So onomatopoeia basically means sounds made by certain words that predicts or that relates with the real world meaning of the words. Thank you for today's lesson as well. Today we look at rhyming as a sound device which concentrates on the repetition of same sounds. It could be internal within the poem. It could be end of the lines in the poem, that is end rhyme. It could be alternate, that is one comes, another sound comes, then the earlier sound is repeated. It could be perfect rhyming. There are different types of rhyming, like I mentioned during the lesson. Then we also look at onomatopoeia, which has to do with sounds again, sounds made by certain words, like a snake hiss. So hiss and the sound made by a snail are positively colorated. There's a positive coloration between the hissing of a snake and the real sound you hear, a dog barking whoa, an engine of a car sounding vroom. Then the few other ones that I mentioned. Now, in our next lesson, we'll go a little bit, we will come back to sound devices later, but we'll go a little bit forward to look at some literary or figurative devices. Literature is so interesting. Today or now, you may be a beginner and will be hearing, I'll be cramping so much information. You can listen to these lessons. That's why I recorded them more than once or twice. And you can pause whatever I say, try to analyze it. And if it doesn't make much meaning, just leave your comment and I'll come back with different videos explaining your concerns, your confusions, trying to help you clear or clarify a misinformation or any other thing or something you don't understand. But in our next lesson, when we look at other figurative devices, just believe that if I could start from nowhere and understand these devices and talk about them like I'm doing, you can also do that. And once you understand them, trust me, you remain in literature and you don't want to leave. Thank you. Goodbye. See you next time. Bye bye.